Well, Silvia, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I am so excited that we're finally doing this. Like I mentioned earlier, I can't believe we've never done this before. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because I know today we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people shy away from, but this is so important, especially if you have a website, and that's all to do with SEO. However, before we get started, why don't I hand over to you so you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Oh, Henriette, thank you so much for having me here. It's a real treat to be together, and I'm so happy. Well, yeah, SEO, because it's my job. I'm a search engine optimization specialist, and I founded an agency, an SEO agency here in West London, PinkSEO. And it's been my job since 2011, so now it's 10 years precisely. And the accent tells me off. I wasn't born here, I'm from Italy. So when I started back in Tuscany, and I started by accident, basically, because I was working in a touristic field, in a touristic consortium, and my job was very different. I was paid to go and travel around Europe to sign contracts between tour operators and properties, which was the dream job. If you're 20 years old, you're paid to travel Europe and to go to touristic expos. But then the internet came strongly into the playing field, and it disrupted completely the touristic world, because people were not booking in an agency anymore with the catalog. People were booking on their couch with their laptop directly without intermediaries. So touristic agencies started to decline, tour operators started to be affected a lot. And I just lost my job, basically. So I actually fell in love with the anime, because this internet was very fascinating. I saw it had so much potential. There could be so many things going around. And initially I was more fascinated by the digital marketing in general, social media, email marketing, and SEO was the tough cookie that I was very coding related, very technical. But that was one of the reasons why it was so fascinating, because it was very difficult and I wanted to learn more. So I started studying, attending every industry event I could find. And generally, I was the only or one of the very few women in the room, because it's still nowadays, and it used to be a lot more when I started, a very male-dominated industry, because it is tech. It was one of those geek worlds in which were just a handful of women in a room full of men. But I loved it anyway, and it became my world in Italy. Then we had to relocate here, and we did it for the kids mainly, to give them a brighter future and more career opportunities. So I decided, okay, I'm moving back here, I'm relaunching, but I will be launching an SEO agency only. So no more jack of all trades, all round digital marketing services. I will only focus and specialize on SEO. So it's been a very niche work, but I really like it, and I see it's working. We got web developers within the team, we got SEO specialists, all of the elements that you can need to actually work with clients, being able to rank them for whatever they need.
I love your story as well, because, you know, before you and I started this recording, you said that, oh my gosh, business is doing well. You've expanded the team. You had to reorganize things. And it's just so lovely to hear that, because at the end of the day, it just shows that what you're doing is right. The fact that you niched down, the fact that you established your agency in West London, you know, and you've got such an amazing clientele as well. So I remember the first time you and I met and you told me your story, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so heartwarming and brave as well at the same time, in order to take such a step.
It was terrifying, actually, because when we came here, we didn't know anybody in the UK. We didn't have a single acquaintance, none at all. So it was like the slate being completely wiped clean, and you have to restart from scratch with the kids that were uprooted and rerouted out of the family, out of the friends. It's been quite, some days I had to just focus on breathing and taking one thing at a time, not to freak out, because it was a lot on my plate.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we did it. We should have done it earlier, actually, because it's been the best thing we could have ever done.
Yeah. Now, I want to move over to talk about SEO. And I think one of the things that people always say is like, well, you know, we know that Google exists, and most people know that SEO stands for search engine optimization. But I think one of those things is we all use Google, but we don't know how Google works. So can you tell us a little bit about how Google works and how they establish themselves?
Yeah, well, sure. And I think it's useful to at least know how things work. When we are running our businesses, we got to know so many things. And some of them can be very empowering, actually, because once you understand that some elements are quite basic, it becomes more empowering. You feel less scared. And I really love speaking in plain, clear terms about this type of things, because I know there's a lot of fog screens around things that are technical. So you can hide behind difficult jargon and make it difficult for people to understand what's actually going on. But if you know the basic of things, then you can do better on your own. There's a lot of things that you can learn and do differently, even just by knowing how things work behind the scenes. So Google, that we all use, is a system that's been working for lots of years, but basically it works on three main elements. We got an index which contains all the websites of the world. So you can imagine it as a massive library with all the websites that can exist. Then we got an algorithm that's constantly checking. We got crawler bots. Crawler bots are programs. They're programmed to be constantly checking these sites existing around and adding data to this database, the index. And then we got an algorithm which is ranking how these sites are, and will be showing them to a potential user, trying to make this kind of love match. So somewhere in the world there is somebody who's searching for something, and this would be the ideal result for them. This would be the ideal match for their query. So it is so interesting to see how these three elements interact with each other, because, for example, one thing you may not know is that when the crawler bots, these tiny programs, these tiny robots, they're programmed in a very easy to understand way. So they're programmed to execute tasks and check, for example, what is on some pages, to understand what they are about, because then they need to be able to do this kind of match. So they need to understand what a page is about. So they're programmed, for example, to check what is there on the title, what is there in some specific elements of the pages, the images, the content, and they will be scanning and writing down information and trying to deduct and understand what a page is about based on these elements. So it makes it particularly important now that you know, for example, that your titles are going to be screened by the crawler bot, who's trying to understand what the page is about, to make it clear. So if you want to be found for something, what I always say, don't play hide and seek with Google. If you want to be found on a page about chairs, for example, and you made an article about a new type of design, yes, you can use a very fancy title like The Dawn of a New Era, but if you want that page to be ranking for something related to chairs, you need to give that information, that instruction in the title, in the most important elements of the pages. Otherwise, you are hiding something, and Google won't be able to make that match. And you may not know it, but you have accidentally damaged yourself just by hiding important elements that you could instead put just in plain sight. Look, this is about this, it's so clear. Another thing that they may not know, for example, is that every time the crawler bots find the site, the first thing they do, if it's the second time or the third time that they are meeting this site, because they periodically recrawl and recrawl sites all the time. If it's the second or third time they find it, they will immediately try and see if the copy they find today matches precisely the copy that they found last time and is stored in the index. If they match, they won't spend and lose any time recrawling the site. They will move on to the next one. If you've changed anything, if you've added an article, if you've tweaked something, updated some content, they will see that they do not match and they will recrawl the entire site. And this way, the copy that stays there in the index will state last updated today. All things being equal, a website that's been more recently updated than another will rank better, because it's a positive signal to Google that this is an updated website. It's providing more interesting and valuable information. So that's another reason why we shouldn't keep the site static on a website.
It's so interesting that you're saying that, because as you're talking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got so many pieces of content on my website. So my initial question is, do I need to go back and update some of those in order to get ranked higher on the Google search engine?
You should think, when was the last time that you touched it? Because things change and we generally tend to have a lot of evergreen content on the site that maybe we published 3 years ago and it's still very valuable. So one thing, first of all, if you've got the date that's showing in your site, it immediately makes it less evergreen, because maybe you created an article on amazing business advice 3 years ago and it's still valid because people still should check their KPIs, their profit and so on, but it states that it was published in 2017, for example, and people say, it's not so fresh, let me find something. So you know, you see how it changes. It's an immediate bias. The content is still fresh, it's still great, but it just looks old. So date, if you're not a magazine, if you're not a news website, you don't really need it. And maybe your approach to that topic has changed. So my recommendation would be to have an inventory of the content assets of your site, just an Excel file. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. An Excel file in which you have your content, the URLs, the titles, at least the very most important links, and when was the last time you touched it. And then you go back and you see, let me re-see that. Maybe I included a link to something that I'm not doing anymore, to some kind of link magnet that I don't have anymore, a CTA, a call to action that was very strong back then, but now I want to push something else, or I want to retouch it a little bit, and you just update it, keep it fresh, because businesses change a lot and we may forget that we got something, an old phone number, an old reference to somewhere where we used to held meetings or something live, some facilities, something, and it's just a matter of rechecking periodically and making sure that it's updated, and this will pay off in SEO terms as well.
My goodness, it's so interesting. I never thought, because for all of us, we just use Google. We just go, yeah, you know, what do we want? And it's so true what you're saying, because when I do a search on things and I look at the articles, some of the articles are quite high ranked, but they are outdated. So I look at them and go, oh, this article was written in 2015, but I'm in 2021. So the content might be outdated. So it's really interesting. And then I don't go and for that article, I go and find the latest updated thing. But even so, just for us using Google, we need to be a little bit more savvy as well in order to know how it works, exactly like you explained, in order to understand then what is it that we as business owners need to do on our websites in order to make sure that we get ranked higher. And just from what you just said now, I was just like making notes going, gotta go and look at some of my notes, gotta go and look at some of my pages.
Just think how it looks like when you open Google. You see those titles, they're blue and then become purple once you click it. And that's the very first impression you get on a page. If the title looks cool, looks inviting, I'm not talking about clickbait titles, but I'm talking about something that, yes, contains the keyword, contains the topic, but it's quite exciting. And then you've got the URL, and if it's too long, it's not so SEO friendly, because our brain is so full of so much noise that if it's short and snappy, it will stay with you. And then you got this little extract. It's called meta description. It's a little bit of an extract of what the page is about, 150 characters approximately. That will be pulled automatically by Google if you do not predetermine it, but it looks a little bit shabby if it's truncated with an ellipsis, if it's not. If you predetermine it, if you predefine it, you can use those 155 characters to make it really impressive, to make them count and make sure that people read it and say, yeah, I want to read that, and they click on it. So just defining those elements can make a lot of difference in terms of conversion. So they become clicks instead of just impressions.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So talk to us a little bit about SEO. What are the three main components when it comes to SEO?
Yeah, well, SEO in terms of search engine optimization can be done in many different ways. And you may have seen people doing it in many different ways. To be really complete, you need to consider it as a triangle, basically. There are elements that interact together, and only if you do it entirely, you will be able to rank for whatever you want, even in very competitive niches. Basically, you need to consider there are technical elements, coding related, so the coding of a site needs to be flawless, needs to be perfect. You need to make sure there are no errors on the pages. You need to make sure that everything can be crawled and indexed and accessed. So from a technical perspective, you need to be able to audit a website and know that behind the scenes for Google, it is exactly as it is, as it should be. So there is nothing that would hold it back from ranking well. Then there is the content side, so the words on the pages. And you need to make sure that you are aware of what people are searching for, and you're using those words, because generally we start with a lot of assumptions and we start thinking that these are the keywords that I want to be found for, but generally that's because we just like them much. But as entrepreneurs, we're very educated, so we know all the right words and all the right terms, but our customers are not as educated as we are. They may, and they generally are, using colloquial expressions, jargon-free. They're using very plain language, and it may not be the words that we have on the page. So we need to be able to speak the language that the ideal customer speaks. So research, keyword research, make sure that you know what they search for, and then that it is present on your pages. So start with knowing what language they speak and make sure it's present on your page. That's the content side. And finally, another element that you need to consider is that backlinks are something that Google considers as extremely important for a website. A backlink is a third-party domain that is not your website, that is linking to yours. And in Google's eyes, it looks a lot like an endorsement, like a vote, like a sign of trust to your site. So if they are qualitative, high-level types of websites. So if you know that you can get some type of guest blogging, some kind of collaboration with somebody else's website that you know that you've already got some connection with, do make it happen, and make sure that your sites are linked together. So from their site, a link to yours. Every time you get a link from somebody else, it's like if you're getting a token of trust. And in the end, the ones with the most of these may win in terms of ranking.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, you know, talking about the triangle, just as you mentioned it, I mean, the first part of the triangle, the techie parts behind the scenes, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. But yeah, I think that is where people would come to you and basically say, hey, can you help me do an audit on my website in order to see what goes on behind the scenes? And the second part of the triangle, the content, I think that is really key because I do put a lot of content out there, but that's in the form of my podcast because I'm not a big blogging fan, but I do love my podcast and I use that as content to go out there. But you are right. We have to be so careful as to the content that we're putting out there and using the right keywords, because I find myself sometimes, you know, if you're not using the right keywords, it doesn't show. No matter what you do, you won't show, you won't rank anywhere. And the backlinks, oh my gosh. I only discovered backlinks and how powerful they are when I started using Pinterest as an example as one of my main strategies. And when I got Pinterest on board and I started using that as a strategy, about 70% of my traffic coming to my website is just through Pinterest. And then obviously some other referrals and other backlinks are coming through that as well. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, I love a little bit of these kind of techie stuff and figuring out what I have to do. Personally, because my website is on WordPress, I use Yoast, that free tool, that free plugin. And for me, it's just like a game every time when I post new content. I've got to make sure that all those 3 little circles are all green so I can happily move forward.
There's a lot that you can do on your own. If you cannot outsource, if you don't want to outsource, or at least even if you want to outsource, if you know how it works, it will help you better understand what somebody else is going to do for you. So of all the 3 sides, the technical one is the one that you may struggle a little bit more if you're not really tech savvy. Coding is not your thing, but the others, absolutely, yes, you can do a lot on them. You can do a lot in terms of content, even for a blog, for a podcast-based website. If you just think of transcribing the content that you have spoken in spoken words and make it become written words that will be part of the HTML code of the site, and Google will be able to draw information from, you will see an immense growth in terms of traffic, because then Google is able to actually index and rank you for the expressions and the contents and the things that you've been speaking about in each of your episodes. And link building, yes, you can buy it. Lots of people selling links, but if you think that you as an entrepreneur have got so many connections with other entrepreneurs because of networking, because of collaborations that you may be doing, if you start thinking from this perspective, then every time you have a potential collaboration with somebody, you can ask them something more like, how about we do some kind of something together, connecting our website, a guest blog or something like that. So you as a business owner are the ones who can best think of all these link building opportunities in a very organic way. So not both, but really earned by your own connections.
So I think one of the things that we would like to ask you, seeing you're the SEO expert, is there a couple of DIY tips that you can provide the audience? Because let's face it, not everybody of us have got either, you know, the money, so to speak, in order to go into an SEO expert like yourself and say, okay, here's my website, you know, I need an order done on it and I need help in order to get the SEO updated. But are there a couple of DIY tips that you can give the audience? So at least we can start now by doing some of the work ourselves. And then maybe at a later point, they go like, okay, I've gotten it to a point, but I need an expert. So if there's a couple of tips you can provide us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, some of the things we mentioned before, like, for example, doing research. Doing research is very insightful, even just from a business perspective. So you need to be aware what people search for. So if you know what they want, you can give it to them. So start by doing lots of research, and there are plenty of free tools that you can use. You can check on Google itself because it auto suggests stuff. So if you start typing something, it will finish up the possible query based on what people generally search for. So that is something that if they search for, you should ideally be found for that. Then you can check Google Trends, it's free. There is some other tools, like, for example, Answer the Public is another free tool. There is a free one which is called Uber Suggest. So there's quite a lots of different tools that you can use for free and start digging into what your audience searches for, whatever you offer, whatever are your products, your services. Make sure you know what words they use, and it can be inspiring for you then when you got that type of inventory that we mentioned, that Excel file. Basically you will have technically we call it a keyword to content map, because basically you will have your content, the existing assets that you've been creating over the years, so all of the URLs, and you need to make some kind of association with the ideal keyword that you would like to be found for of the ones that people search. So you know what is the page and what is the keyword, what is the page, what is the keyword, and then you try using Yoast if you got a WordPress, so you try to make the match as well as you can. But you may find pages without a keyword, so you just optimize them. But you may find generally lots of keywords without a page. Because when you do this kind of research, you may find that people, wow, they search for that. I didn't know that. That's so insightful, because now you know that instead of just being confused, I don't know what to write about, I got no inspiration, I don't like blogging because I never know what to write about. If you know what people search for, you got the demand, it's ready. You only have to provide the offer, so you can match. So you will have lots of keywords with no content for. So that is what you have to do. You have to start writing, basically. And or blogging or vlogging, if you start from video or from a podcast, then you can transcribe it, and you've got a lot of different content ways that you can repurpose. But yeah, then you try to make it as clear as possible in terms of the words that you use, never to go too much into jargon, and try interlinking your pages as well as you can. So you're guiding people throughout the site. It's like if they come and visit your home, you're not just showing them the main room, you're basically guiding them to see all of that, and they will see how much knowledge you have, how much you've been sharing, and in the end this creates this kind of know, like, and trust feeling. So they see that you've got a wealth of expertise, and you've been giving them for free a lot of advice, so in the end they trust you, and if they have to go to someone to get something, it would be likely to be to you instead of somebody else that they don't know yet.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And the fact that you said that website Answer the Public, I only recently heard about that as well. And I went on it and I was just blown away. I was like, this is an amazing website and it's all free. So for those of you listening, in order to do some great research, obviously Google, the auto suggestion is amazing, just like Silvia said, Google Trends, but also an amazing website that I recently discovered, which she just mentioned, is answerthepublic.com. So go on that website, especially if you don't know what content you want to write about. Oh my goodness, it's a goldmine and I love it. And it's like, you know, my favorite websites all highlighted now because it is just so amazing what you can actually just discover and what the ideas and the concepts and the content is, that all of a sudden you just go, oh, I can write about this and I can do this and I can do this. It's amazing.
Is a way you have to peek into Google's database. So it opens to you the free version doesn't give you the country database, but at least you get an idea of what people search for, which words they use, what are their contents. And it's one of the parts of my work that I love the most, because it's scary sometimes to see what people search for, because you see some kind of human behavior. They say, okay, but it is very insightful, because actually you look at what your potential customer needs, and then you can help them out.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Is there another tip that you can give us, apart from obviously just starting off with the research? Maybe something we've already touched upon, but we can dive into a little bit more?
Well, one thing that I would recommend every business owner to have if you've got a website is using Google Analytics. So again, being able to track what type of traffic do you have, how much time people spend on a site. Because one thing that people may not know is that within the algorithm now, Google has got a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning. So it will learn by our users' interactions with our websites, and it is tracking data as we see them on analytics. So how much time people spend on a website is a good positive signal. If Google can see that people spend a lot of time on pages, they watch a lot of pages, so they actually interact a lot with the website. These are good signals and the site will be ranking better. If instead Google can see, for example, a lot of bounce rate, which is when somebody enters a site and goes away straight away because it doesn't answer what they wanted, that's a very negative signal, and Google will deduct that it shouldn't be ranking so well for that keyword. Let's demote it. So it's important for you as a business owner, if you've got a website, and with everything that's happened this last 2 years, websites have become one of our most important business tools, because everything is happening online now. You need to be aware of what your traffic is like, how many people you have, where they come from. So which sources of acquisition of traffic are there, social media, which one are they, who's giving me traffic, what are people doing with my site, which are the most visited pages, which are the pages that people exit straight away. It is something that you need to learn and then to act upon.
That's really amazing, because I know I'm connected to Google Analytics and I've got it. But the first time I went into this, I was like, oh my gosh, it is figures and graphs and charts. And I was like, way over my head. I had no idea where to even start looking at anything. So what would you suggest then, apart from people's viewing habits coming to your website? Is there anything in particular that they need to focus on when they are on Google Analytics?
Yeah, well, analytics can be extremely complex. If you go into detail, you can even track goals, like how many times people download something, how many times people click a button, where they came from. So that can be extremely insightful, but very advanced. If you want to keep it on a very basic level, you have behavior, the behavior section, which is what people do when they are on your website, how much time they spend on a page, which pages they check the most, and so on. Then you have acquisition. the acquisition section is where they come from. So again, you always need to define the time frame. You have to tell them which moment of time you are watching data of. Is it last month? Is it last year? Is it last week? Do you want to benchmark it? It also allows you to check, compare with the previous period, with the previous year. So you can do lots of important benchmarks. And then the users, and it will tell you how many they are, how many they have been, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm making notes here because it's really interesting. I mean, in the beginning, when I started using Google Analytics, like I said, I was just gone way over my head. Thankfully, now I've got an expert. So I've got a VA who's really, really good at it. And she's just looking into it all for me and keeping me updated. So she goes into all the nooks and crannies and sort out things. And I just get just a spreadsheet, just with the update. And I'm happy with that. Okay, so I want to ask you, obviously, when it comes to SEO, a lot of us do struggle with the concept of, hey, I'm just starting building my website. I don't have all of these things in place yet. But what would you suggest? What tip would you give somebody who's just starting off with their website, who hasn't been running a website, or they're just starting off a whole brand new website? What tip would you give them?
Know your audience. So again, the element of research is paramount even before you start launching a site. When we are asked to work with new websites, they're going to be built way before we start building the websites, working with the agencies building the websites, we start researching what people search for. And then you build all the pages and you build all the content around that. So it's the opposite way. It's not you telling people stuff. It's people wanting you to tell stuff. So then you are of service. You are helping them out, giving what they want instead of trying to find somebody who wants what you give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic tip. So because I do know I work with a lot of clients and a lot of people, it's like, well, where do I start? What do I do when I start building my website? How important is it? And it's like, well, do your research. So I'm glad that you kind of highlighted this as well. Oh my gosh, Silvia, I just want to say this has been so amazing. You and I could talk about this forever, but I think if we do talk about this forever, we're going to blow people's minds and they're not going to make any progress or take any action at all. So thank you so much.
Little by little, yeah.
Yes, little steps by little steps. So thank you so much for being here and just sharing this. However, before we go, you've got an amazing freebie for everybody. So why don't I hand over to you and you can tell us a little bit about it.
Oh yeah, we try to create a checklist so that basically you can see straight away, I got it, no, I need to do it. So it is quite straightforward for you to know at what point you are. It's like a quiz, it's like some sort of test that you do and you can see, and then you can action upon what in your case specifically is left to be done. So that's what we happy to help you out with.
Amazing. And thank you so much for making that available. So for those of you listening and watching this video, go down to my show notes where you can download the SEO checklist that Silvia is providing you absolutely for free. And I promise you, even if you're just starting out your website, or if you've been running your website for a while and you think, oh my gosh, just what Silvia said today, I need to look into this. Go and download the checklist and just, tick it through. And worst case scenario, if it's way over your head, like it's been with me in the beginning when I started, just get in contact with Silvia. So what we're going to do, her LinkedIn, her website details will be available in the show notes, so you can go and stalk her, go and connect with her, chat with her. She'd love to connect with you, I'm sure. But also what she's done is she's got an fantastic YouTube channel where she's got so many videos available for you with guides basically telling you what to do. So download the SEO checklist, go and look at her YouTube channel, go and follow her there, go and look at all those videos she's got available. And then go and stalk her, connect with her, and, just reach out and ask her for your advice, because ask her for her advice, not your advice, because I know she'll be able to help you. Like she said, she's been in this business for 10 years. She knows what she's talking about. And everybody that I've met who's come across Silvia just raves about her services. So you cannot go wrong if you go and connect with Silvia. Oh my goodness. Thank you so, so much. I'm so glad we managed to get this in the diary and finally getting it done.
It's a pleasure, really. I'm so glad that we did it. And even if it can just be helpful for someone to get some more information, I'm here. So you can just pop me an email and say, I got this out. And I'm always happy. I promise I will reply to anyone.
Oh, bless you. Well, thank you so much. Almost she's keeping you accountable, okay? So just let her know. Thank you so much, Silvia. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure you and I am going to be in touch fairly soon again.
Very soon. Yeah, indeed.
Amazing. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.